All right, everybody wants to fix housing. We want housing to become more affordable. The number one, and quite honestly, the only way to fix housing is to build more housing supply. Supply and demand, really simple, right? We don't have enough housing supply for the current population. As we grow, it only gets worse. We've underbuilt in some areas for 50 plus years. So you want more affordable housing. You want to fix the housing crisis. The number one way to do that is creating more housing supply. I'm going to read through an article. It talks about 5 different ways to fix housing supply. In other words, build more homes, right? Millions of homes is what we need. So I'm going to share this article. I'm going to go through it because there's a lot of talk about how homes are unaffordable and the median age of a first-time home buyer is 38 years old. I deal with it every day in my business as a mortgage broker. People are like, I can't afford a $4,000 a month payment. You want any of these problems solved? It starts with building more housing. I promise you that. So let's jump into this article. I won't waste any time. You let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you've got other ideas, other stuff you've heard that you think might be a solve to this issue, which is America's housing shortage, especially over the last decade or so. We've way underbuilt. Current estimations estimate that we're still underbuilding, building something like 1.4 million housing units per year, while we add 1.9 million household formations per year. So if we're forming 1.9 million households and we're only building 1.4 million units, the housing supply shortage is only getting worse. Here's some ways to solve it. I'd love to know your thoughts, right? It's a pretty radical idea, but then when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, you realize it's not that wild. To talk about auctioning federal land to build freedom cities, right? This is what this conservative-leaning advocacy group is talking about. AEI, American Enterprise Institute, is this advocacy group that we're going to hear from here. And everybody agrees that houses are too expensive for working Americans. And so everybody wants more housing supply and at a cheaper price, right? They want affordability. That's something that everybody, left-leaning, right-leaning, Democrat, Republican, everybody wants that. So Ed Pinto, this gentleman right here, he's the co-director of this AEI housing center. And in this article, he talks with Scotsman Guide about, this problem and what he thinks can solve it. So estimates on how much new housing is needed varies greatly. I've heard estimates like we're 4 or 5 million households short. He talks about in this quick little blurb here, in just California, like there's been so little housing built compared to California's population since the 70s. That's why home prices have 10x since the 70s, right? Like it's not normal to have the type of appreciation that California has, but due to supply and demand, home prices go up because there's just not enough households. Even if we're losing people, I think we got a net, a net 4 million less people over the last few years. People are leaving California, but we still are way short on housing supply. So this auctioning of federal land is a pretty radical idea, but then when you really dig into it, you're like, oh, it's not that wild, right? There's a Bureau of Land Management that has land all over the country. And this kind of game plan that our buddy Ed Pinto has talks about 10 cities in Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, California, Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, Oregon, and Montana. Cities in these 10 states, right? So those 10 states, you could take 1,000 square miles of land and build 5 million homes. Just so you know, when you talk about these 1,000 square miles, some people will be like, oh my gosh, like we're not going to kill our national forests and national parks and military bases. It's not that type of land. And it's 1,000 square miles of 380,000 square miles. So rough math, like 1/4 of 1% of this nationally owned, land that's owned under the Bureau of Land Management. You take that, you build 5 million homes, and they're talking about you can do it near existing cities. There's another interesting idea in here that they talk about. 3 million of these new homes can be built near existing cities or within the city boundaries. And then 600 square miles of that 1,000 that they're talking about would be used to develop freedom cities. This is a pretty interesting idea, right? An entirely new city. It would take 40 years to develop something like this, but you take a 30 square mile section and you build all the infrastructure, right? You build the homes and the schools and the hospitals and the grocery stores and the hardware stores and all of that. And you have 2 million new homes in that 600 square miles of additional land. So this is 1/4 of 1% of this land. You designate it for this big project. We're going to build 5 million homes, and you add 5 million homes. There's a second option, like this title of this video says, 5 different ways, right, to solve this. This guy Ed's got other options. The second option is called light touch density. And a new subdivision that was started 10 years ago, you're selling houses, building and selling houses. Over time, that's called a greenfield. There was nothing on that land before. It was used for farming, and now it's a greenfield. Basically, looking back at the development of some of these subdivisions, and basically with increasing density, you create more homes. Because I don't know, I mean, California, it seems pretty dense already. Like with the sewer lines, water, all of the development that goes into creating one of those subdivisions, you have that already done or in progress or planned, and you just within that existing plan add 2 million homes. Option 3 is also this same light touch density, but talking about infill, tearing down the existing structure and building higher density stuff in its place. So this is easy to think about, right? Like a beat down single family home gets torn down, and if it's on a 10,000 square foot lot, maybe you build 2 single family homes, maybe you build a 4-plex, and that makes it a higher density development. Where there was 1 home, there's now 2. Where there was 1 home, there's now 4 housing units. And that's pretty easy to kind of wrap your head around, where you're adding more housing units with the same land, and it's just infill. Okay, the fourth option is livable urban villages in the core areas. Core areas that are zoned commercial or mixed use, but they don't have housing on them. This one is really interesting because, like he says in this article, this has happened already across the country very successfully, but not enough. I can tell you with absolute certainty, with kind of the change in commercial real estate, less people going to the office, or companies needing less office space, especially less office space in some of these, really expensive middle of city center type areas. Maybe that turns into some infill. This is like what they're talking about in option 4. It's zoned commercial or mixed use. That turns into housing. I've seen it happen, right? And so they're talking about more of these. And the last 5th option is light touch density without tear down. That's ADUs, right? Existing home, plenty of land in the backyard, you add an ADU. There's some of that going on in California. That's a popular thing. Just more of that, right? So these are 5 different ways to add more housing units. And if you add all of this up, according to our buddy Ed in this article, that's like 17 to 20 million homes over the next 10 years. I promise you, you add 20 million homes over the next 10 years, home prices come down. Absolute certainty. Like it will happen. So, he kind of ends this article with like, you don't have to build 20 million homes in the next 10 years, but the point is you could. Every locality throughout the country is going to have different options of these 5 options that make more sense. Some of them, it's like, hey, ADUs, very popular and a very feasible option in California. Maybe some of the commercial conversion stuff in California, that makes sense. Other stuff is, maybe there's subdivisions in Texas where they built and they had each unit on an acre. You don't need that. You can put 4 homes on an acre, right? And so that's how they're added, higher density stuff. So all these options, different options in different localities, but all options to figure out how to add more housing. Builders often produce large homes that people can't afford. So, how can they be incentivized to build smaller? The builders are not the problem here. You have to look at the state and local governments who have policies that force builders to build large homes. They make land scarce. Scarcity means higher prices. So yeah, between that scarcity of land and all the different red tape and all the costs that go into it, it's a good point. Final thoughts by this guy, Victor, who wrote this. There's 5 real solutions that can solve our housing problems. If only a quarter of this would happen, right? If 5 million of these extra units got added, of this 20 million on these 5 different scenarios, we wouldn't be talking about it. So let me know your thoughts. It's really interesting stuff. As somebody who talks housing affordability every single day with clients, I think it's a fascinating topic. And I think that these conversations that actually get at the root of it, adding more housing units, doing something about the housing supply shortage is the real way to solve it. There's no program, there's no things that adding extra demand on the demand side are going to do. They're going to have a positive effect on true housing affordability, but supply definitely will. Let me know your thoughts. If you want to connect with me and my team, greatmortgagebroker.com. We're more than happy to help. Just go to there, fill out the quick form. We're in 48 states, and that's where we can start the pre-approval and get you pre-qualified to buy. Greatmortgagebroker.com. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.